Now in our society, we have so much technology. We're not getting in groups and going to play bingo or going to bowl anymore. We're in our rooms by ourselves, like on a tablet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past or whatnot, you going to, your friend's house and play canasta or something like that, going to play bingo and things of that nature. So are you missing out on certain things as we had in the past as far as like being connected with each other?
Hi, I'm Alvin Pasaoa, and this is the 635 Podcast. The 635 Podcast is about local politics, economics, and social and cultural issues in the Alvin Community College area. The views expressed on the show are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of Alvin Community College.
All right, welcome back to the 635 Podcast, and I'm here again with Ron Smith, and we're here on part 2 of our conversation. In any case, tell me what's going on. How's life?
Man, it's good, man. I'm just staying busy. Now the semester's starting to get more into the meat of things or whatnot, but that's what happens when you're quote unquote successful. You just stay busy or whatnot. So, yeah. All
right. So last time we talked, we were so we had your career in football, at college football.
Yes.
Tell me that transition from going to football into, I guess, just full-time, just academics, from athletics to scholarship. What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty interesting because I had an opportunity to do things that I didn't get a chance to do when I was playing football, hang out and do different things like that. But I could do the college thing more. Or without having to get up and go to practice and work out and things like that and be so regimented. So it was kind of fun to kind of hang out with friends and be more free, if you will.
It's funny you mentioned that because like my main knowledge about college football is from movies' portrayal of college football. And because you mentioned, do the college thing, but in the movies, it's like they spend like most of the time showing all the crazy parties and stuff like that. And so it's interesting where you bring this contrast where, you get to do the college life thing once you stop doing football.
Well, I guess that is kind of ironic, but it's not to say I couldn't hang out when I wasn't playing football. But honestly, after football, I kind of did things for myself or not. I could go to church. I could go library. I could just do a lot of things for myself. Go hang out more at home back in Dallas and things like that, without having to worry about I got to be back at a certain time to be at practice. But all in all, I was appreciative of the things, as we talked about previously, that football taught me, and I used those as I went on. But then I started kind of getting into my career. Once I started getting close to graduating or whatnot in my undergrad, it took me 5 years. I went right back to school after my graduation to go get my master's. So I was in school for 7 years straight. Yeah, so I was like, okay. But I liked it. That's why I said, hey, I wanted to focus more on the school part. And then I kind of tried to transition into my career, and that was kind of all over the place at one point. So,
what was that like, the switch? I mean, like, so you decide to stop, and then was this basically at what point in the school year did you say that you wanted to not play on the team anymore?
Well, it kind of wasn't my decision. I know it was 2002 spring football. All right, and then you get your letter to say, hey, you're going to be back on the team. You're going to renew your scholarship. So it was like maybe May or something like that. I got a letter in the mail. I'm in the dorm, college apartment, and they sent it to me saying, hey, you're not going to get your scholarship. I was like, man. So I was like, all right. So then I ended up just finishing that school year, and then the following in the fall, I just was like, quote, unquote, a regular student. So it was kind of a transition. But like I said, I just did school, and then once I graduated, I ended up like, man, what am I going to do? Because I was in the East Coast at this job. I was in Massachusetts. I would go out there during the summertime and work at a summer camp for kids. It was Cape Cod. It was amazing, right? So I ended up getting a letter because I got my mail forwarded to me saying that you have been denied for this particular program for my master's. I wanted to do communications at first, all right, because I had already set things up. So hey, I'm going to get my master's ahead next in the semester after I graduated. So It's a pretty interesting story. So they ended up denying me. So when I came back from Massachusetts like that fall, I had to go straight to my college professor that I had in undergrad. I was like, hey, they denied me. Can I get in for the fall for sociology? The deadline had passed. I don't know what she did. And I ended up being able to go to do my sociology degree and my master's like that fall or whatever. It was a quick thing. So things just happened so fast or whatever. But I was appreciative for sure.
Oh, that's good. All right. What made you decide? What decision was it to decide to go to graduate school?
Well, it's a great question. To be honest with you, I wasn't ready to go into the real workforce. Simple as that. I was like, what I'm going to do? I'm graduating. 'Cause it took me 5 years to graduate undergrad, which is, fine, whatever. And then after I was about to graduate, I was like, man, I wanted to be a police officer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wanted to be a police detective. But I was young, and my grandmother, my late grandmother, she was very influential in me moving forward. She was like, hey, do you want to go get your master's? I was like, yeah, I do, sure. And she was like, well, son, go do it. And I was like, all right. So I just put a lot of things on the back burner as far as like the police officer thing, and just went straight to go get my master's.
Well, were you thinking about career options, or were you just thinking that you would just enjoy the subject?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, Albert, man. I was like, I always found it interesting. I didn't know what I could do with it or anything like that. I didn't know I was going to be a professor or whatever. I was like, man, let me go back and get my master's. I figured it would help in the long run eventually. I didn't know how. Dude, I'm like, I don't know, what, 22, 23 or something like that. So I'm just like, all right, let's just do it. And it was fun. I like college. It was fun. So I had no clue what I could do with it, to be honest with you. I just like sociology. Yeah.
So what about it? What are some things that, as a student, you're just like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what jumps to mind?
Well, I don't know. Like my professors I went to Texas Southern University, they're really cool, very nice. And they just made the topic very interesting. I don't know I guess really they were talking about like, I don't remember exactly what it was. I just know that my professors in that field were interesting, and I always felt like that sociology had a lot to do with real life or whatever. So how they presented it, particularly Dr. Mosley, that's the one that's very influential. I still talk to her every now and then now, but she presented the information, and it was like, man, that's pretty interesting. I go through that, and it seemed very personable. So yeah, and I thought it was kind of easy. It came to me easy as well, as far as like the material, the theorists and theories and stuff. So yeah, that it wasn't anything in particular specifically.
What how was the jump to graduate school compared to undergrad?
Well, that's pretty interesting. I thought it was a pretty smooth transition because like I said, I always liked school. I kind of was like a nerd, I guess. But then when I got in graduate school, I felt it was a lot more in depth than the undergrad, of course.
Oh yeah.
So smaller classes. I think I had to get used to like the long classes. I would be in class and we would be in there for like 2 hours, and the professor just sit at a desk and talk.
Oh,
that's
wow.
it. And it'd be like two of us in there sometimes. It's like, it's like all right, but it was a smooth transition. I would say that. And I had really good professors at TSU. So I didn't have any problems like adjusting to like the style and things of that nature. I found it more interesting, especially when I wasn't tired because I was talking forever. And
oh yeah, was it? So this was at the same school?
Yeah. So I got my bachelor's at Texas Southern, and then I ended up getting my master's at TSU as well. Right. So like I said, I applied for the communications department at first. I didn't have any communications in undergrad, but I always wanted to be like a sports reporter or something like that, like ESPN or something. But it didn't work out like that, I guess.
Okay. So what did you have to write a thesis or anything?
Well,
like
no.
that?
So for us, our department, our program, you didn't have to write a thesis, but you had 3 days, if I'm not mistaken, of like comprehensive exams. So you had to do a little bit of writing, but it was like blue book.
Yeah.
All right, so you weren't like writing a thesis as far as like a paper comparable to like a dissertation or something like that. But it was like a 3-day blue book on each of the theories, if I'm not mistaken. I think structural functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism, if I'm not mistaken. And then it's pretty grueling. So even though it's not a thesis, you're writing like 3 mini theses, if you will, over a 3-day period.
Wow.
Yeah, to get out of there. So I think one of them I had to come back and redo it or whatever, but you had that opportunity. But like I said, it was a smooth transition, man. It just, sociology just comes to me easy. But I tell my colleagues now that if I had an opportunity, I'll probably major in psychology.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I would go back and major in psychology.
I think psychology is fascinating, but why psychology?
Well, because particularly when I think of, like, I don't want to get too techy, too nerdy, but frankly, like Sigmund Freud and those guys, like just, nature versus nurture or whatnot. And I think that plays more of a role as far as like how people think and things of that nature, as opposed to sociology, we're more nurture. I thought the psychology component, and then you start talking about like psychopaths and things of that nature.
Oh, that's fun.
I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So psychology, and frankly, to be honest with you, as far as like career wise, psychology, there's a lot more opportunities out there, particularly at the community college level. Like they need tons of psychology professors everywhere. So.
Yeah, and then there's definitely teaching opportunities, but there's also I have a friend I met in graduate school, and he's in psychology, and he works for a company that I believe they do like some type of personality testing related to companies. Maybe, I don't know if it's in hiring or whatever, but there's definitely sort of an industrial psychology angle.
No, and sociology as well, but psychology, like you said, to your point, I mean, you can do so many things as far as like diagnosis and things of this nature, get your licensures and things of that nature. So, but don't get me wrong, I like sociology, I love it, but psychology, how does the mind work? How do people think a certain way or whatnot? That's something that I find pretty interesting and fascinating.
Well, what would you say? I mean, I guess it's the ultimate day one undergrad question, but like what is sociology, and what would be the difference between sociology and psychology?
No, it's a great point. So sociology, the technical definition is like the systematic of human behavior and social structures, essentially, where psychology, I like to look at it like the nature versus nurture aspect. And nurture is sociology as far as like the environment. How does your environment play a role in terms of your development as an individual, whereas psychology is more the mind, if you will, the nurture component, the DNA and things of that nature. But what's happening now, particularly in a lot of the subfields of sociobiology, particularly after the 2003 genome project, they start to find out, the scientists they thought they could learn human behavior just through the genome or whatnot, but they found out that it was the social factors as well that played a role in terms of individuals and how they are formed as far as like their behavior. So in other words, it's not just nurture, it's not just nature, but it's both, if you will. So sociology, we're kind of like cousins, I say, but sociology, we deal with the social structures, particularly at the micro level, macro level, regarding human behavior, whereas psychology, they're looking at like, the mind and, the intricate aspects as far as like DNA and things of that nature, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from my pop understanding of psychology, it's there tends to be a sort of a lack of what you mentioned several times, is like social structures, right? Yes. What exactly, because I think I have an idea of what social structure is, but what is a social structure?
Well, on a micro level, social structure is family. I mean, that is definitely, it could be on a macro level, something like government, if you will, but I tend to focus more on family, if you will, in terms of that social structure, because a lot of the research is showing that family is key as far as like development. Now, you always got obviously anomalies and stuff, like when we talk about, hey, you come from a great home or whatnot, and then you end up being like a psychopath or something like that, but family is really big as far as like individuals' development is, and with the sociobiology, and we just talked about this in this week or whatever. This is in our class or whatever. But what happens is your environment can activate or deactivate certain genes, right? This is how
I've heard about that.
Yeah. So you're in a certain environment, it turns on and off genes depending on what your environment is calling for or whatnot. So it's pretty interesting. You want to look at the social factors. You want to look at the surroundings that individuals are in, but you got to take in consideration that individual in terms of their physical being, in terms of their mental being, and all those other components.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can imagine that you take one person in a certain environment, maybe the psychopath comes out or whatever, right? And how does play in with I don't know, give me some examples of social structures would be like family. What else would I guess would a football team be a social structure?
I would definitely argue I would look at that like a family as well, for sure. I mean, that is a social structure. I mean, Max Weber, he was a German scientist, if I'm not mistaken, but he talked about, bureaucracy essentially. You got to have these different particular structures, if you will. One of the things he talked about is informal aspects. So with these social structures, if you will, like I'll use government on a macro scale, now you're not looked at as an individual, but it's more like about what is your social, what is your student ID, what is, we're not having those social bonds as I talked about previously. But when we talk about social structures, it just depends on what it is. Do you want to be at a micro level, or do you want to be at a micro level? ACC, I mean, we're a social structure. I mean, you can look at that. The economics, that is a social structure for sure in a lot of ways. So it just depends on what you want to look at. If that,
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of now to blend in with political science. Alexis de Tocqueville talked about what he called intermediary institutions, because he was always thinking, well, there's the individual and then there's the government, and then his concern was always, well, what's between the individual and government, right? And so, of course, there's family, but there's also church. There's local civic groups and things like that. So that's that kind of reminds me of that.
No, that's very interesting. Particularly when you talk about the civics group aspect. When I talk about George Ritzer in terms of groups and organizations, one of the things that's going on right now, it was a book. I can't remember the guy's name, but he basically talks about where now in our society we have so much technology. We're not getting in groups and going to play bingo or going to bowl anymore. We're in our rooms by ourselves, like on a tablet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past or whatnot, you going to, your friend's house and play canasta or something like that, going to play bingo and things of that nature. So are you missing out on certain things as we had in the past as far as like being connected with each other? So it reminds me of what you're saying as far as like that guy you was saying, Tocqueville. I've heard of him before. What's in between the social structure and individual? We need, and again, I'm a big proponent of we need those social bonds, right? So, I don't think that technology is bad, but at the same time, there's drawbacks to everything, I didn't want to take you away from what you're saying, but
No, in fact, you mentioned, I mean, I haven't read this, but I've heard about books. And one book, because there's a fascinating title, I believe the book was called Bowling Alone.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Exactly. That's exactly what I was referring to. That's him. I can't remember his name, but that's exactly the one I was talking about.
Yeah, that's
Bowling Alone. Yeah.
That's so sad. But I mean, I wonder, there's the obvious internet trend, but I'm wondering if some type of trend even preceding the internet would have started. I mean, have we become more, I guess, I don't know what the term would be, like individualized or lonely or isolated more over the last few decades?
For sure. Well, I would argue yes in terms of the last few decades, but this has been going on for over 100 years at least, definitely since the beginning of industrialization.
Oh wow!
Because Emil Durkheim, I talk about him a lot because I call him the suicide guy. In like 1897, he wrote like this treatise, Suicide, and what he was realizing was at the beginning of industrialization, particularly in Europe, I believe he was French. He was seeing like all these changes or whatever because people were moving from farms to the city to find work or whatnot. And what he started to realize, he saw a trend in suicide, right? So his argument was that once people move to these particular, he calls it anomie, 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 a feeling of normlessness, a feeling of hopelessness or whatever. People move away from the farms because mom and dad and the nuclear family was on the farms working, right? Working together. But then the dad moves away and goes to the city to find work. Then that causes family dysfunction because it's just the mom and the kids on the farm. Dad's in the city. You don't know these people or whatever. You miss your family and things like this. Then in the cities, there's crime starting and environmental issues. So it was a lot of change. So Emil Durkheim was saying, hey, this is causing individuals, if you will, to have like this sense of anomie, this sense of normalcy. And then, suicide rates are going up because of this. And that was the lack of social bonds. So when we talk about industrialization, that is like new technology at the time.
So it's almost like the shift to a more urban environment. And it's almost like almost a paradox or something, but it almost seems people moving to a more crowded place actually makes them more isolated.
Isn't that how ironic is that though? You think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have all these people. So, but at the same time, particularly now within the last few decades or last couple decades for sure, I mean, you walk around and people will have their headphones in. I mean, we're not really paying attention. It's called Jim and Shaft and Jesselshaf. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's this other sociologist, old school, classical, Ferdinand Tönnies. And basically he just talks about with Jim and Shaft and Jesselshaf, I'm pronouncing that wrong, but we used to be together. We used to know our neighbors and stuff. But then with I can't remember which one it is, but now you go to a coffee shop, you don't know anybody. You don't know your neighbors, whatever. People are looking down on their phones or whatnot. I mean, again, I'm not against technology, Albert, but at a certain point, you got to understand how far is this taking us from our human being component as far as like our social connections. And Mark, and I'm not knocking these people. It's just a fact. Mark Zuckerberg, I remember when he talked about Facebook, and I'm paraphrasing, our Meta now, he was saying he wants Facebook to bring us closer together. And I always ask the question, is that the case? Is that happening? You know?
Okay, so before we get to what we can do about this, the question is like, okay, let's, I think it's pretty clear that, we have in a way become more isolated. There's less time spent with families. I believe churches, is it true? Churches are sort of declining membership. Is that?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a great point, Albert. I'm glad you brought that up. So after COVID, right, or the lockdowns, if you will, people stopped coming to church. I mean, the numbers, so I haven't looked at them specifically, but I continue to see the trend and hear the trend that the people have not came back to church and church attendance is lower, right? For whatever reason. Maybe, perhaps we can look and see, because now a lot of churches or some churches are streaming their services now. They started that during COVID because people were staying at home, but then after COVID, they continued to stream their services. So perhaps some people stay at home on that end and just watch it on television. But yeah, church attendance is down or whatnot, and perhaps it's unfortunate depending on your perspective.
And now I'm curious, like what other stuff, like what other, I guess, social structures were more common that are less common? So churches are one.
Church is a big one for sure.
What are some other things that people had?
Man, I don't know off the top of my mind. Maybe I should have made some notes on that, but
bowling leagues.
Who's bowling now? I went to bowling a while back. It's like it's still jumping in there. You go in there, but how many people want to go do that or whatnot? Perhaps working out, going to the gym or whatnot. I mean, that could be a definitely, that's a culture as well. Like that's a subculture, if you will. But right now, off the top of my mind, I really can't think of a social structure that is declining as far as like church or something of that nature.
I would wonder, let me see what else, like, I wonder if people volunteer less nowadays, like in terms of, joining whatever local organization, or basically any type of civic organization. I just don't know if
I'm curious. I'm curious if people, how often people were volunteering anyway, like joining civic, like Bowling Alone was talking about. How many people go and play bingo? I never went and played bingo anywhere. I mean, no offense. I've just never. How many people go and say, like, to their clubs or whatever? Like, I don't know. Hey, we're gonna go and go to our club tonight, our civic club tonight. I don't. At least in my lifetime, I don't really. At least my age group, I don't know anybody that does that.
Yeah. I don't.
Well, I would argue our generation, perhaps we're the same age. The technology, we don't need that or whatever necessarily to go to a quote unquote civic club, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, because nowadays, if you want to change the world, you could join the right web page, send them some money, make the right comments, share,
exactly.
Share, like, and subscribe.
Exactly. Staying home and making videos or whatnot. I was working at an elementary school some years back. I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. And these are fifth graders. I was like, hey, what do you want to be? He wanted to be a YouTuber or whatnot. So he didn't say, hey, what do you do for fun? I like getting on my iPad, things of this nature. He didn't say I like, going and playing bingo or going to the chess club or anything like that. So I think they did have a chess club in that elementary school. But I don't want to seem like I'm down on technology. I'm not. But I would argue that has a lot to do with what we see as far as like the social structures are lowering in terms of attendance or whatnot. So.
Well, I mean, there's it's a learning process. I mean, people are using technology to try to substitute for other things, right? I mean, instead of showing up in person, you join some online group, and then the question is it filling the same role? Is it really performing the same function as it used to? I mean, what is lost when you go and join an online group as opposed to face-to-face?
Well, that's a really good question. Now, I'll say this, preface this. Well, perhaps we say, oh, people are not joining civic groups anymore, or we're not going to bingo, whatever. But perhaps it's been replaced with online, quote-unquote, civic groups, but to your point, as far as like what has been lost, tons. There was an article that was done. It's called "Socially Distanced Loneliness During the COVID-19 Lockdowns or Social Distancing Measures," whatever. But it's 2021 Sage Journal, and they argue that the face-to-face contact is helping with people as far as like their mental well-being. So during the lockdowns, this paper calls it strict social distancing measures. They never use the term lockdown, upsetting to me, but they argue that you won't get that same face-to-face connection or that good mental being on virtual, like being on a computer.
Yeah.
They said face-to-face contact during hard times, I'm paraphrasing, is good for people's well-being. So when I look at the lockdowns, and look at what's going on with the kids and their mental well-being and things of that nature, they were in front of a computer screen almost every day, all day or whatnot.
Yeah.
They're behind now. The study shows kids right now, they're behind academically and socially, right? Because they wasn't getting those connections physically. They were on the computer screen.
Yeah.
So, I would argue, and this is where my sociology comes in as far as like the nurture component. They lost out, those kids lost out, and adults, but particularly kids, because they're still developing mentally, socially, and everything like that. They lost out on those important connections with their kids, just going out with their friends, going to the playground, stuff like that.
Absolutely. And coming back to like Zoom, some of the saddest things I think would be like I remember that, like, oh, some kid's having a birthday. Well, how about we all just do a Zoom meeting with like a dozen friends, and then you watch how it goes down, and it's just so awkward.
Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't simulate the same thing as walking into a party. You're staring at, a dozen people all staring at you, and then everyone's locked into the same conversation. I mean, it doesn't pan out that way. Like, if you show up to a barbecue, it's different, right? It's a bunch of conversations with a small number of people. And then you sort of move around and talk to different people, but it's not like 30 people all taking turns talking in front of the other 29 people. There's something that's just really the way. I mean, so it's sort of off in terms of trying to capture that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, like social cues and things of that nature, you're not going to get that on the computer screen. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not against technology. The name of the article that I was referring to is Socially Distant Social Network Confidants, all right? And it's 2021, and it's talking about the health and during the COVID-19 pandemic. And what it's saying is like, we need these social bonds, right? So that computer screen, when I see the kids, your brain is not fully developed until like in your mid-20s or whatnot. So these kids, they don't understand like, hey, how do I, act when I'm around people or whatnot? You're not getting that same socialization on the computer.
Yeah.
And now when they go to school, I mean, it's good for them. They're happy or whatnot, but because you get to learn, you bounce ideas off each other, and same thing with adults or whatnot. We were behind my first year here at ACC, my first semester, it was online strictly, and then we went back that fall. So I started at ACC that first semester, I was strictly online.
Yeah, that's one of my colleagues, Karina Lovas, came in during lockdown too.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
I didn't mind it, but I was like, okay, but I was super happy when we went back in the fall because I was like, man, it's totally different, totally different in terms of my teaching style, in terms of like just having that connection with the students and facial cues and things, because you're on the computer, they have their cameras off and stuff a lot of times.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way the current technology can't simulate face-to-face. But although, if anything, I am kind of sympathetic to sort of Mark Zuckerberg's, he wants us to wear the goggles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if anything, I mean, if we had to do it online, I would much rather put on the goggles that would hopefully simulate first person. And then the way I think that sort of group online chat should be is that you're not talking to everybody in the chat at the same time. That's just bizarre, right? And then what happens is the most boring person takes over, and then we're all just have to listen to, and then everyone's just kind of nodding, and it's like that's just so unrealistic. It would be your ability to navigate, and there has to be a sense of distance so that you go and then you interact with just 3 of the people who are in that group, and I guess by being in a virtual reality world, there would be that notion of space, where you can move into a certain sort of subgroup, talk to them, and then you can kind of just move on. And
that's that. What you're referring to, is metaverse. This is the whole rage right now, the metaverse. I've played like the VR goggles, and it's pretty interesting when you put it on. I don't know if you had an opportunity to. Yeah, I mean, I can see how people get addicted to that, you know. And you have some countries, they actually have like their actual city halls on virtual reality. Like you can go to, I know for a country for sure, you can go get your goggles, go downtown and take care of real business in the metaverse or whatnot, right?
This is Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. That
I don't know if it's Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse. I know there's several ones. It's not because you have Meta, but you got other ones as well. But I know for sure, like one of these countries, I don't know off the top of my mind, where you can go and take care of business in the metaverse. I'm saying metaverse. I know Meta or Facebook has their deal, but just generally speaking, as far again. I would argue there's always a double-edged sword to everything, right? And I think that's going back to industrialization. Yeah, it's great that we had factories. It's great that things were efficient, you know, with the factories in the 1800s, the Carnegies and the railroad and stuff, but at what cost or whatever? I think that's what we need to understand. And now when you look at things such as like the chat bots and things of that nature, you know, I know Microsoft had a patent in 2017 where the crux is basically they're going to try to bring the dead to life or whatever. You heard about this? Where
I've heard about a company. I think it was called Ever After or something. It was this company. It was AI, and I believe that you would train this AI to act just like you, so that when you died, you know, somebody else, your employees, but I mean, I could see the appeal. Like you have, you know, a child, right? And if you were going to die, especially if you knew you were going to die, you know, can I train this AI so that it will act just like me? So 2 years later, he comes to me with a problem, and it would say, you know, exactly what I would say.
But is that really you though? That's that and 20. All right, so and perhaps we're getting away from the metaverse, but it's kind of in the same line where it's called the 2045 project. All right, it's this Russian founder. The Dalai Lama has endorsed this. All right, and essentially they want to put your personality into an avatar, right? And you're gonna live forever. Now, you can say this is crazy stuff or whatever. When we talk about, we went from industrialization, we got trains, we got the steamboat, that's excellent, to now, hey, you're going to live forever in terms of life extension. But the 2045 project and others, I know Google a few years back, they had on their front page, Time Magazine, can Google solve the problem of death or something to that nature? They want you to live forever or whatnot. So, I mean, that is, you know, Ray Kurzweil, the futurist guy, he worked at Facebook at one point. I mean, this is out there now. Yeah. You know, will you live forever? Is it you or whatnot really living forever? You know, is your personality really downloadable? You know, things of that nature. That's the stuff we got to think about, man. Yeah. This is where we are.
Oh, yeah. No, that's mind-blowing. My take is that it won't really be me, but that person will pretend to be me and say, yeah, it's really me. Don't turn me off or something.
Don't turn me off. That's
But I do think that, you know, it's possible to create, like to have an AI that would act similar to you enough to serve a certain purpose. And like what that purpose would be, you know, if there would ever be a loss of communication, let's see, like some type of military commander or something, like if you lose you're in a submarine and you lose contact with the surface, but I need to talk to the admiral, but here's the Admiral AI who would say, you know, who would act just like him, and you know, and then I could ask him for advice or something.
No, that's pretty. No, and speaking of you know, the military, I know of course, Elon Musk is doing this Neuralink or whatnot. But even before Neuralink, there's already been studies that try to put chips in soldiers' brains.
Yeah.
So like if they die or whatever, or if they're paralyzed, whatever the case, it's like a black box, like on an airplane. So you can like download that data and say, hey, what was their last thought or whatever. It's like, yeah, I'm dead. I was like, man, that's pretty cool. Like, okay, but they want to extrapolate that out. When I say they, like the elites or whatnot, those running this, they want to extrapolate that out to the population. It's like, all right, so.
Well, so we all have the black box.
They have a black box, yeah.
You'll see the car as it's about to hit you. And, I mean, I guess in a way that would be great for crime, right? Like who killed you or something.
I know, but who's gonna have control of this technology though? That's the thing. So it sounds good, like man, that's awesome. But who's gonna have control of that technology? Where's that data gonna go? Things of that nature.
Oh yeah.
Is it gonna get hacked in the cloud? We're gonna have a Minority Report now. With Tom Cruise type of thing. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, I mean we're so getting towards sci-fi. Sci-fi is becoming real.
It's becoming real. So that's what I'm saying. Like we started out so mundane with technology, but now it's moving so rapidly. And I'll go back to the nature versus nurture part. So how is this going to affect individual development? In terms of their physical being, what is this going to do to our society in terms of the social component, as far as like interactions and things of that nature? So some people, be it as may, the technology going to move so fast, we may have to go to the metaverse. Some people are not going to want to go to the metaverse. They may not want to be plugged in. And are they going to be looked at as terrorists, whatever? Are they going to be looked at as dissidents? These are the social things that we have to ask ourselves when we get these new technological advancements. And this is the thing, this is happening now, and you're in economics. CBDC, central bank digital currency, crypto, things of that nature. Are we going to have fiat currency in the future? Because already recently, like Wells Fargo, like some of these banks here in the United States, they did a test run, essentially. I'm paraphrasing this, where they were testing out CBDC and how that would work, central bank digital currency, and how that would work. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we go, cashless in the next few years. Obviously, you're economics, so. I
mean, we're already kind of cashless, in a way. Like there are places now that will just use Venmo or something like that, and so we've already gotten a taste for that. And really the big difference, if it's the Federal Reserve who's running this digital currency, I mean, I don't see that being a big change. I mean, the big change would in fact be a decentralized currency that the Federal Reserve does not control. I mean, that's always been the big thing about Bitcoin or anything else, is that the selling point was no government controls it, no central bank controls it, and of course there are always issues about, if we have an uncontrolled currency, then how do we do monetary policy, et cetera. And
I'm talking to the economics professor. I brought that out in you, but just with the technology thing, like what happened with the truckers in Canada, where they say, hey, you guys are dissidents. I'm putting it in my own words. We're cutting off your bank account or whatnot.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I'm looking at, like, all right, so
control.
Yeah, control.
Yeah. And it is interesting that Bitcoin was an idea of, well, no one controls it, but now there are currencies created that actually can be controlled. I believe China is one country that is doing it, and so this would be electronic currency that can track every expenditure, and they can shut you off. Right, and so that's always the question of, it always begins with technology being liberating, but then at some point, who has their finger on the levers, and then they can use it to control you.
And that's my whole point. And that's one of my whole points. So it goes back to, we're talking about chips in the brain, things of this nature. We talk about the metaverse. All those things are baked in there, just like the CBD, the digital currency thing. Who's going to control that information? Who's going to control that particular entity or whatever?
Yeah, you're gonna have a chip in your brain, and then they're gonna raise the subscription fee to $25 a month, and if you don't, then you lose half your brain function or something.
I mean, it sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. You never know.
Well, I mean, and then of course the big question is of course, is it going to be government or is it going to be a big corporation? I mean, that's always, and then is there a difference, right?
Is there a difference? No, that's my point. Yeah, is there a difference?
But yeah, I mean, for better or for worse, it does seem to be that the big tech, it usually starts off small, but it ends up being either controlled by a super powerful corporation, or by a government, right? And I guess that's always the game. And then there's usually a backlash and a response, and someone tries to figure out a way around it. And usually for a while, maybe they succeed a little bit, and then maybe they get brought back into the fold.
And this is nothing new, man. I mean, I always tell my students, hey, I'm not a Marxist every time right before I talk about him. But Karl Marx, I mean, he kind of had a vision of something like this where he talked about, the class consciousness. All right. You got to understand that it's the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. The bourgeoisie, those that owns and means production, land, things of that nature. But I tell my students now, hey, look, when we talk about the bourgeoisie, they may own land as well, too. But now it's about communication structures and things of that nature. The currency, those particular aspects, infrastructure and all that. But the proletariat, me, you, we sell our labor for wages, we the worker. I think that this false consciousness that Karl Marx talked about as well, basically thinking that, I'm putting in my own words, like the government or like the bourgeois class has your best interest in hand, and it's not really the case. But, even if you're like poor, you barely can eat, prices are up, you're still in love with your basically your captor, like a Stockholm syndrome type of aspect. So I think Karl Marx had it right there, at least that philosophy or that theoretical component. But then when you get further in terms of some of the other things he kind of talked about, I don't think it worked out, obviously, in terms of paper communism, socialism, etc. But to your point, or what you're saying as far as like government and corporations, I think he had it spot on when he was saying like the bourgeoisie class, the elites. Personally, I don't know if they really have our best interests at hand. Perhaps we can see that. And obviously this depends on your perspective. But yeah.
Now, you have a kid?
I do. I got a daughter, man. She's 5, man. She started preschool this year, man.
Oh, wow.
She goes to school. My wife is a teacher.
Okay.
I think she's 2nd grade. And my daughter, she's in preschool. So they go to school together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
All right. So, and then this is always a big one. So what is going to be your take on your kids' interaction with technology?
What we're dealing with that now.
Yeah.
We're dealing. So she's on the phone. To a certain degree, I like her knowing technology and how to work those things or whatnot. But at the same time, I have to stay visual in terms of, time spent on it and what is being watched, because particularly she likes YouTube or whatnot.
Oh, yeah, YouTube.
You know that.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And for us, TikTok is a no-no for us.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so TikTok is a no-no. I don't even download that on my phone.
Yeah.
We don't do TikTok at all. But what I find myself doing a lot with her being on the phone and the iPad, I have to monitor. Now, see, everything comes around. This is the nurture aspect.
Yeah.
This is me in terms of the family, being a parent. I watch what she has on YouTube, because sometimes it's certain stuff I don't want to watch, and I have like, hey, don't watch that. But then I have to go back and I have to take it out the algorithm, like stop it, not interested, things of that nature. So it's basically being visual now in terms of her, having a phone when she gets older. Me and my wife are saying, hey, maybe when she's like, I don't know, sometime in high school, you know, like that. But yeah, I mean, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid them being on technology, arguably. So I like her having it, but at the same time, you got to be, visual.
Yeah. I mean, that's I mean, it's a tough question. Part of it is, I just think about the time. Like, because I think, me growing up, with TV, I mean, the big difference is with TV, it's like, and with just a handful of channels, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would watch when good stuff is on, and then at some point, it reached the point where there's nothing that I wanted to watch on it. Then I turn it off, and then I go do something else. Right?
Did you play video games? I play video games like Nintendo and stuff. So
all right, yeah. You're probably about 10 years younger than me. So I had the Atari. I had the original Atari.
Oh, okay, wow.
And the reality is even for then, those games got boring. But I know that the games nowadays, that we hit a point with video game technology where it becomes so immersive that you could spend all day playing those games. But when I was growing up, the type of technology we had was very low tech, 2-dimensional, very, it was not immersive, because it was basically the Pac-Man era, Space Invaders, like old school. And I remember just getting bored of those. But at some point, though, I could see how those games would definitely get better.
I mean, I came in right after you, like 89, like with the Super Mario Brothers and stuff like that. Yeah, so but to my point, like it's like my daughter, yes, she likes the technology, but I kind of think back, like you said, I watch TV too, but I play video games as well. So is that the same as what she's doing now? You know, I don't know if my parents or my dad, whatever, were so vigilant of me playing video games all night or whatever because I could do that. But yes, it's a different era because, like you said, it's so immersive. You know, you feel yourself getting into it, particularly with you can just watch this computer screen. And there's studies that show like these things are made for people to be get addicted to it. Like phones and things of that nature, waves and all that. So, but you just got to be vigilant, man. Very vigilant.
You know, that algorithm is just saying, let me serve you up something else. You like this? Let me give you something else.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the big thing is that, I mean, even just not even games, just YouTube or any streaming service it's
Netflix.
Netflix is that, especially if you have access to all of those, it's like at any moment in time you have an unlimited access to great content all the time. Right. And compared to TV, it's like there's a natural limit. It's like, you know, like Saturday morning cartoons, for a few hours, awesome cartoons. After that, boring adult stuff. And then now I have to go out and find something to
go ride your bike or something.
Yeah. But now YouTube and stuff, it's like you can just keep going. Right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And then you get into childhood obesity and things. A lot of these things are connected, man. But again, we're scholars, Albert, and you know, this is stuff, you got your expertise, I got mine or whatever, but, you know, it comes along with reading and things like this. The average person may not even think about these things, how they're connected, all right? And arguably, you know, and I don't want to sound like, oh my gosh, the government's out to get us, but, you know, these companies, it's about making money. It's two things, power and money. I mean, that's just fact of life. So you want people to, like, be addicted to your product so they can continue to consume, continue to spend money, continue to be, you know, interested in your product and things of that nature. So, you know, that's where it comes in. You have to be a parent if we're talking about kids and say, hey, enough is enough. Go outside. Let's go to the park. And I take her to the park, you know, things like that for sure. Yeah. So she won't just be on the phone. We'll take her to different places. Cheeky monkey. Hey, go play on the you know, with those people over there. You know, go pretend. Have an imagination. Like,
is she gonna play sports?
It's a great question. I don't know. I think she wants to be a ballerina. She wants to be a ballerina. You know, we'll see. But as far as like basketball or something like that, I don't see her. She talks about cheerleading as well. We'll see.
Well, she's 5?
She's 5.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we had her in music. She likes singing and things of that nature. Okay. So she has a piano in her room. She was in piano lessons at one point, but we're gonna probably put her back in that. You know, this is her first year in school, so we're just trying to get her acclimated to that. But I don't know. I wouldn't be down on it perhaps, but I would try to gear her more toward the arts, arguably. But she's more cerebral. She kind of reminds me of myself, very cerebral. I was a nerd, man. I mean, I had a little bit of athletic ability, but I look at myself as being a nerd, if you will.
Well, what made you a nerd?
Well, so for instance, I had a Nintendo.
Okay.
I played Mario Brothers. I played different video games, but I like to look at the book, like read the books with the codes in it. Like it would be like this thick book or whatever. And I was like, I asked my aunt, I was like, hey, can I please get this book? And she was like, go on and get it. So I'd be reading about the video game.
So wait, so what was in this book?
Well, it was like Super Mario Brothers, for instance, hypothetically, different games in there, but you read it and it tells you like different places, different back doors in the game or whatever, like different cheat codes and things of that nature. And then it's like explaining to you how to like beat the game or whatnot. And it has different games in this book. This is old school. This is before social media and stuff, right? So it was like this thick book or whatever that it was on the grocery store, like when you see the checkout, and it's like Nintendo Game Secret, something like that. And it's like a novel or whatever. And I'm like, hey, can I get this game and this book? But I was always just curious about certain things, you know, like to read and, you know, so that kind of, but I could play sports, basketball, football and everything like that. But I was always into like the academic aspect, always good in school, things like that. Yeah.
Did like socially were you a nerd?
I was awkward. I was awkward. Yeah. Socially, I was. I would consider myself cool. If I didn't play sports, to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have any friends. You know, because the bond that I built with my friends, I'm still friends today, but we had that one thing in common, talking about social structures as we did previously, particularly on a micro level. The football team all the way up to college was like my guys, particularly from elementary to high school. That was like my family, because I moved from Indianapolis. Like, I got brothers and sisters, but we're spread out, and I was basically here by myself. And like, those guys on my team were like my brothers, man.
That's
but
cool.
if it wasn't for sports, I probably would be a loner, man. I kind of am still a loner in a sense, but yeah, I was really socially awkward in a sense. I was, nobody thought I was cool, man.
Did this football team, like when you were a kid, this football team when you started playing, was that tied to the schools, or was it just like a different organization?
When fifth grade, because you can only start playing for the school when you're in sixth grade, but fifth grade it was like Pop Warner. That was like the city. All right, Pop Warner, like the city, they have different teams for like the kids, the surrounding communities. But then when I got to sixth grade through eighth is middle school for us out there at the time. So sixth grade, that's when you start playing for the school.
Yeah.
All right, and then high school for the school. But before fifth grade, when I first started playing, that was like for the surrounding community. All right, they had, and it's like that here in Alvin, if I'm not mistaken, just different communities where they have like their own leagues or whatever for the kids in the community.
Yeah, no, it's great that you had like at such a young age like school-based athletics, because you could see your teammates outside of class. Right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when my kid joined the soccer team, and we were driving him out because it was a good team and everything. We were driving him out like 25 minutes. It's like, yeah, he would never see his soccer teammates outside of soccer.
Oh, okay.
Right. And that's the downside, I think, for whatever reason. Like all the sports he's doing now, it's not tied to his school, and so he doesn't really get to make friends with, So I think that's the thing that that is kind of missing, and I'm sort of trying to find a spot that's sort of more tied to his school, or at least geography.
I understand. So, like I said, and it was just kind of cool that most of the kids I played with before I started playing in sixth grade for the school, we all went to the same school anyway. Like, and I saw them in the neighborhood, but that's the big difference. Like, fifth grade, at least at the time, you're not connected. You weren't old enough to be able to pay for the middle, because the elementary school, they don't have like a football team or whatever. So. Not until you got to middle schools when they were like organized, if you will, and you're like paying for like an institution, if you will.
Yeah, and I really would like to see like these schools, like at the younger age, having some type of after school activities, just because, I mean, what I've noticed is that like there is literally only one kid. Like, when I grew up, there were kids outside the block riding their bikes around. I would just hop on my bike and go hang out with friends. And for some, I don't know if it's my neighborhood, but I just don't see many kids riding their bikes.
Me neither.
Like,
me neither. Yeah.
Where are the kids? And because I would, after school, I would just go hang out with all the kids out on their bikes. And my kid, there's really just like one friend who comes by, and I'm like, where are all these?
Where are the kids? I see a little bit. My next door neighbors, there are two girls who are riding their bikes, but isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
Think about that. You live in a neighborhood, and then. Get this, in the morning all the kids they're riding the bus or getting on the bus, and then when I'm driving like around 3 or whatever, I see all the kids get dropped off and they just go in the houses. It's like nobody's outside.
Yeah.
So that is, but again, we go back to technology. What are they doing inside? They're not doing it. What are they doing inside?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect screen time, video games and stuff like that.
Nobody wants to. Who wants to go outside and play? But I do. When I do take my daughter, to be fair, to the little park area, you can tell like parents are like bringing their kids out there like, hey, get out here. It's been kind of cold recently. The weather's been really kind of erratic. So we've been kind of busy. So I haven't taken out there in a while. But when we go to like the little playground in our neighborhood, you do see families like go out there, sending their kids like, hey, go out there.
Yeah.
At least my daughter's age and stuff, 5, 6, stuff like that.
Yeah.
They still be in their school uniform. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, we definitely, people recognize that it's important to get face-to-face contact, and it's just a matter we gotta find solutions as to in this era how to get kids out of the house. And
maybe that could be our next the solutions.
That's true. And I'm gonna have to take notes because I gotta apply this to my kid.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So the social connections is everything. We don't realize anything. Social connection is big, face to face, the interactions. And I'm gonna confess that was one of my biggest issues with the so-called lockdowns, because it really, and according to the research, it really had a detrimental effect on people's mental and physical health, right? And this data and the literature was known way before then. I'm talking about 2010, 2011, even before then. So it kind of boggles my mind, like these big entities, WHO, CDC, et cetera, would go along with locking down when the data, the literature, not opinions, show that not having connections is detrimental to people's health physically and mentally. So.
Well, there's going to be a lot to dissect. I suspect there are going to be a lot of dissertations written on lots. So there's going to be a lot more PhDs walking around with being able to analyze what happened.
Oh, for sure, man, for sure.
But thanks for coming on the show again.
Hey, anytime, man. It's been a blast. Every time we come in here, we talk about fun stuff. So thank you.
All right, talk to you next time.